Welcome, welcome. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah.
Amen.
Thank you. So we are in a genealogy of Noah's descendants, and we're getting some details regarding this. And we'll pick up at verse 18, chapter 10, verse 18. So these are these descendants of Ham. We're just continuing. Ve'et ha'arvadi, ve'et ha'tzmari, ve'et ha'chamati. So the Arvadites, the Tzamarites, the Hamatites. V'achar nafotzu mishpachot haknani. And afterwards, the families of the Canaanites spread out, were scattered, perhaps. Vayigvul haknaani, and the border of the Canaanites, Mitzidon Boacha Gerara, from Sidon as you approach Gerar to Gaza. There it is. Look at that. Old name. So Sidon, of course, is way up north. It's in Phoenicia, but you go down to Gerar, so it must be somewhat down on the Levantine coast up until Gaza. That is deep Philistine territory. There's cities like Ashkelon and names like that belonged to Philistines. Boachach Stoma, as you approach Sodom, which is, as we learn later on, Va'amura, Gomorrah, Adma, Utzvoyim. So these are these four cities that were in what was called the plain, I believe the plain of the Jordan. It was at that time uh, originally very fertile. Okay, Ad Lasha, until you come to Lasha or Lesha. Lasha is a pausal form of the word Lesha. So this is basically, I think he's describing the borders that represent the Canaanite area. Ele b'nei Ham. These are the children of Ham, the mishpachotam, according to their families, lil shonotam, according to their languages, according to their tongues, ba'artzotam, in their lands, the goyehem, and among their nations. Okay. Ulashem, so we don't have any, as you can see right here, is Torah Temimah, so not until the next verse. Ulashem Yulad Gamhu, so now we're onto another son, right? Shem was born to him, Avi Kol B'nai Aver, the father, the patriarch of all the children of Aver, Achi Yefet Hagadol, the brother of Yefet Hagadol, the great Yefet, but here in a sense of older brother, right? Older brother. So Achi would be the brother of his older brother Yefet. So let's take a look at it. If you are catching the ambiguity and the difficulty to really catch what's going on here, you're paying attention. So because the question is Ever the older brother of Yefet, or is Yefet the older brother of or is sorry, we're talking about Shem, right? Shem. Are we talking about Shem? He's the older brother, or is Yefet the older brother? We've already dealt with this actually and determined that Yefet actually was the older brother, but let's take a look just to see where we're coming from here. So, Achi Yefet Hagadol, the brother of the older Yefet. Yefet Gadol Shebe'achav Haya. So there's a statement emphatically in Sanhedrin. This is where this is the source of it. Yefet was the oldest of his brothers. Uchtiv, and it states in Parshat Bereshit, in the very first parsha of the Torah, Vayoled Noach, it says Noah begat et Shem, et Ham, et Yefet. Right? It says Shem, Ham, and Yefet. Right? So wait a second. We just said that Yefet is the older brother, the oldest brother, and yet when the Torah mentions who Noah begat, it starts with Shem and it ends with Yefet. And normally, of course, who would you start with? You'd start with the oldest. Why doesn't it say Yefet, Shem, and Ham? Why does it say Shem et Cham et Yefet? And here's the answer. Melamed, this teaches you, what you infer from this is, Shederech Chochmatam Chashiv Laho, that they were enumerated according to their level of wisdom. In other words, Shem was the wisest. It's hard to say that Cham was wiser than Yefet. We know that Cham, of course, did some things that got him into trouble. Are we talking about intelligence? Are we talking about craftiness here? You know, you have to have some intelligence to be crafty. Sadly, it's the misuse of intelligence, but anyway, just some things to think about. And also, I think that perhaps the biggest lesson here is to understand that the Torah doesn't always list things according to age, chronology. It sometimes lists things by different criteria, and of course, wisdom is an important criterion. So anyway, mi dechashiv et Shem beresha, right? The reason we're saying since it counted Shem at the beginning, right, in this list, that's why we have to say it's according to their wisdom. V'yein lefanenu, and check above, right, la'el, above, sof parshat Bereshit, towards the end of the first parsha of the Torah, called Bereshit, the pasuk regarding the verse Vayoled Noach et Shem et Cham ve'et Yefet, where it says there Noah begat Shem, Cham, and Yefet. Of course, that's what they're mentioning here, right? What's going on? Ba'ad Rasha Acheret, we have a different interpretation, different drush, be'inyan zeh, concerning this, sheyefet gadol bashanim mishem, that in fact Yefet was several years older than Shem. And we discussed that. We actually did discuss it, and it's based on the number of years and chronology of the flood. So we already know this in a different way. V'yesh lomar, and we could say, ha dalo yalfu shami pasuk zeh. So we could say the fact that they didn't use this verse, which talks about Yefet being the oldest brother explicitly, why didn't it just learn it out from that? Why didn't it go into a sort of a arithmetical calculation to prove this? Why didn't it just use this verse? Mishum, because here, the Khan, right in this verse, ein hechreya, it's not compelling, right? The Yefet Gadol Bashanim Mishem, that in fact Yefet was several years older than Shem. Why? Mishum de Yesh Lomar, because you could say the Hagadol, that this word Hagadol, Ka'e El Shem, that it's actually referring to Shem. As I said, this verse is a little bit ambiguous. Right? It's not so clear that when they say Yefet HaGadol, that the Gadol here is referring to Yefet as opposed to Shem. It could have been. And that's why they don't use that particular interpretation. V'yen Rambam, and he says, by the way, you may want to check Nachmanides' comment, right? He also read a major commentary on the Torah. Shepiresh, he explains the Hagadol, that this word Hagadol, the great, right, or the oldest, Musav al Shem. He argues that it actually is Shem who's the oldest, Nachmanides, B'yachas el Cham. And that's in reference to Cham, meaning that Shem was the older brother to Ham. He was older than Ham. Shehu, Shem, that is to say, that he, Shem, Haya Hagadol Sheba'achei Yefet, that he was the oldest of Yefet's other brothers. For who neged pisuk hatamim. But if you look at the trope, it is not the way the trope divides it up. The trope notes these little squiggles and things, okay? Let me go back there. We have to go back to the previous page. Okay. All the way back. Let's see here. Here it is, right here. So there's a tipcha, right? And that's it's a pause, it's like a comment, because these little squiggle marks, the trope notes, not only inform you regarding the actual way in which the word is to be chanted, they're also they also break up the sentence. They say how to break up the sentence. And Kol b'nei Ever achi. So it says, so here you have to say that there's a comma here, and Yefet Hagadol, Yefet being the oldest, is how you might want to translate that. And so uh, the Torah Temimah is saying that Nachmanides may not be correct, that in fact, the way the Torah is parsed proves that he is not correct. Let's go make sure I covered everything here. Yep. Okay. So we'll finish up this particular chapter here. No further commentaries here. B'nai Shem, the descendants of Shem, Elam v'Ashur, Elam and Ashur v'Arpachshad, v'Lud v'Aram. So he had a lot of children, right? We keep going. Uvnei Aram, and next generation, the children of Aram, Utz v'Chul v'Geter v'Amash. Utz, Chul, Geter, Amash. And so that's him. Arpachshad, let's take a look here. Yalad et Shalach, he begat Shalach or Shelach. Here we go, the pausal form. Veshelach Yalad et Aver, and Shelach begat Aver. Aver. So Aver was, and we mentioned B'nai Aver here, right up here. Okay, so a descendant, let's see, that would be a grandson of Shem. Ula-Ever Yulad, and to Ever there was born Shnei Vanim, two sons. Shem ha'echad Peleg, one of the two sons was named Peleg. Ki b'yamav niflaga haaretz, because in his days the earth was niflaga would be that they were scattered, they were separated out. V'shem achiv Yoktan, and his brother's name was Yoktan. We're anticipating right now, we're foreshadowing, I believe, the story of the Tower of Babel and the fact that, okay, they were not able to sustain unity there. And that happened during his Peleg's life. Oops, sorry. Let's see what I can do about this. There we go. Vayoktan Yalad et Almodad, Yoktan begat Almodad, ve'et Shalef and Shelef, ve'et Chatzar Mavet, ve'et Yarach, et Chatzar Mavet and Yarach. All these children, you can see how they're multiplying. Just want to make sure I've got, okay, going on a little bit more. Ve'et Hadoram, ve'et Uzal, ve'et Dikla. So another three individuals. Ve'et Orval, ve'et Avimael, and another here. Ve'et Shava, and so another three here. Ve'et Ophir, ve'et Havilah, ve'et Yovav, and Ophir and Havilah and Yovav. Kol ele bnei Yoktan. All these were the children of Yoktan. Vayhi Moshavam Mimesha Boacha Safara, and they dwelt from their place of dwelling was from Mesha as you approached Safar, Har HaKedem, the eastern, I think Har HaKedem would mean the eastern mountain. Eile b'nei Shem, these would have been the children of Shem, the Mishpachotam, Lilshonotam, according to their families and according to their languages, Ba'aratzotam, Lagoyehem, and again, in their countries, according to their population, something like that, inhabitants. Ela mishpachot b'nei Noach, these are the descendants of Noah, the Toldotam, according to their generations, the Goyehem, according to their nations, generations, nations, Ume Ela, and from these, Nifridu HaGoyim Ba'aretz, the people were spread out and separated in the land, Achar Mabul, after the flood. Vayichol haaretz safa echad. So we're on to a new chapter here, and the entire earth was of one language, udvarim achadim, and also again one speech, one speech. Okay, let's keep going here. Inyan agada zot tzarich biur. He says this particular agada that sorry, you need to do this. Safa achat, forgive me. Safa achat, one language. Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yochanan. Chad Amar, so one of the two said, Shahayu medabrim b'shiv'im lashon, that they were capable of speaking 70 languages. So in other words, they were just polylingual. V'achad amar, and one said, Shehayu medabrim b'lshot yechidi shel olam, that when it says safa achat, it means that that God's language yechido shel olam, the soloist of the world, b'lshon hakodesh, in Hebrew, so that everyone was speaking Hebrew at the time. That's, so to speak, God's language, Hebrew. So here we go. Now he says, Inyan agadazot tzarich. He says this, the whole matter going on here is begging for interpretation and explanation. Ki hamefashim katvu, right? Because Torah interpreters said to ad hahaflaga, that up until the nations were all scattered forth after the Tower of Babel, hayu kulam medabrim b'lashon hakodesh, everyone was speaking the holy tongue, in other words, Hebrew, everyone, v'achar kach, and afterwards, keshebilel Hashem etzvatam, when God caused their language to be confused, they started to speak in these other 70 languages. They had their own unique one of those 70 languages. V'zeh tema, he says, this is a little bit perplexing. That all of a sudden you're starting to speak another language. I mean, do you wake up one morning and find you can speak fluent Russian? I mean, it doesn't sound possible. You know, this incident occurred, and now all of them are speaking different languages. Is that possible? Uh, so let me see. V'zeh tema, this is amazing. Shiatchilu pitom ledaber b'shonot shonot, right? That they should all of a sudden be able to speak different languages. V'gam bichlal yefshar lomar, and in general, one cannot say she'ad az, that up until that point, haya lashon kol haolam rak lashon hakodesh. Is it possible to say the entire world was speaking only Hebrew? That was the only language they spoke up to that point. Sha'arei mefurash, because look, if you look at the Torah carefully, in the text of the Torah carefully, it states explicitly above the Parsha HaKodemet in the previous chapter, Eleb Necham, it said these are the descendants of Ham, Lemishbechotam, according to their families, Lil Shonotam, according to their languages. Yes, Mike, sir.
And that kind of reminds me of mathematics, where we only use 0 to 9. You know,
Yes.
nobody questions it. We just do that, right? We don't have any concept of using other number systems. I mean, right? On a scale like language.
Yeah. Okay. Yes. Oh, okay. So of course, you know, the Babylonians also had a base of 60. That's where we get 60 minutes, and I guess it's that there's so many primes that divide into 60, but I'm not sure.
We do, but
Yeah.
other countries don't use different number systems, right? We all
No.
use 0 to 9, right?
I believe so. I'm not, and of course that could be because we have 10 fingers. That could be the reason. I'm not sure. People do sometimes count on their fingers. Okay. So yeah. Ele b'nei Shem, and again, here's another verse. Ele b'nei Shem, these are the descendants of Shem. Lemishpachotam lil shonotam, according to their families and according to their languages. So come on, we have in the Torah itself talking about people having different languages, right? Even before the Tower of Babel, and even before they were scattered. Harei dikvar hayu leshonot kvuot lechol ha'umot. So we already know there were assigned languages to every single nation. They all had their own languages. Venir. So it would then seem, let's put this together now. Bi'ur hanyan kachu, that To understand this, we need to say the following. This is the explanation. Shebe'emet, that is to tell you the truth, ad dor ha'hafaga, up until the generation of the scattering, in other words, after the Tower of Babel, af al pi lashon hakadosh hayon lashon klali l'chol olam, despite the fact that, in fact, there was this general language called Hebrew. They all understood, as you'll see. So the entire world had Hebrew at its, in its consciousness. But nevertheless, hayu lashonot meyuchadot, they had specific languages, kviot lachol uma v'uma, established for each and every nation. Everyone had its own unique language. Uchamo shenimsa dugma b'zeh hazman, and we could find examples of this nowadays to this fact. That is that people like who come from Russia to the United States very often will speak Russian to each other, but they all understand English, right? Or at least most of them do. They make the effort, right? So they speak in English, they communicate in English, but to one another they continue to speak Russian. Okay. Shelashon Hamedina, right? That with regards to the state language, Shom'in kol b'nei hamidima, that is to say, everybody who lives in that particular state understands that language. Ulevad and despite and over and above this, kol umah shebenina, every nation that is in that particular state, yeshla tzrichim, make sure. Let's see. Forgive me. Yesh la lashon kavua la'atzma. They also still have their own unique language, even though they all understand Hebrew. V'ach keshehechelu la'asok bevinyan, and only when they began to occupy themselves in the construction of this building, v'hayu tzrichim shiavinu ish et lashon echav, and it was absolute necessity that a person should understand his brother's language. We should understand one another, right? B'chol ha'olam, in the entire world, hiskimu, they all agreed, beinehem, amongst themselves, sheyu midabrim lak b'shon hakodesh, that they should only speak Hebrew, the holy tongue, shekol ha'olam, because the entire world, hayu shom'in oto, because everyone understood it. Everyone understood Hebrew. So this is where they said this. Okay. The inyan bilbul halashonot, and the confusion of tongues, this particular subject. Haya, it was shehishkiach hakadosh baruch hu mehem et lashon hakodesh, that God caused them to forget the Hebrew. They no longer understood Hebrew. V'sheba kol uma ledaber bisfata hamiyuchedet la, and every nation returned to just speak its unique language. Umimela, and automatically lo shamu ish sfat re'ehu, and automatically people did not understand the language of their neighbor, of their friend, if they were from a different country and from a different culture. V'lachein chadlu livnot ma shehetchilu, and that's why they were no longer able to continue. They had to leave off building the tower. V'zohi kavanat hachachamim, and this is what the sages are talking about. This is what their intention is. The drasha shelifanenu, in the previous drasha. Mar Mefaresh, one explains, Tchunat Svatam, that the attributes of their language, Beinam leveinatzma, amongst them alone. Ukeshebaim lashon, and ukeshivim lashon, and like 70 tongues. Klomar, that is to say, kol uma bilshona. So, in other words, every nation according to its specific language. Vatafas shivim lashon, and he holds on to this example of 70 tongues. Keneged Shiv'im Umot, to correspond to the 70 nations, Haminyan Haragil B'chutz La'aretz, which is considered common numbers outside the land of Israel. Oh, sorry. Oh, I'm so sorry. Chazal. No, sorry. Chazal is, of course, our sages of blessed memory. They often refer to the 70 nations of the world. Forgive me. Umar Mefaresh, and one of those opinions that we were referring to, we didn't know who said what, but we just know these two people disagreed in this way. Umar Mefaresh, and one of the people, one of the authorities explains, Hakavanat Leshonam, that the intention, so to make sure I'm reading this correctly, right? Benogel Levinyan Hamigdal was in regards to the construction of the Tower of Babel. Shehiskimu, that they agreed, ledaber kulam, that they all agreed to speak bilshon ha'olam regarding the national language or the language of the world, lashon hakodesh, namely Hebrew, u'kamo sheba'arnu v'dok, and just as the way we explained it, QED. So that's where we're at right now. It is not easy. Go in here. With this mark, yes. And I need to stop the share. Okay. Mike, question.
Are the Chinese mentioned in the Bible?
I I know that the word for Chinese is Sini, okay? I don't know that they are mentioned directly. Remember, when they mention these 70 nations they would, I would say, because Shem was the progenitor of all Asians, right? That Yefet is Europe, Ham is Africa, Shem is Europe, so that Chinese would also be descendants of Shem. But they could
I
be
thought there was so Shem is I mean Semite is from Shem, right?
that absolutely.
Is that right?
You are correct. Yes.
So so isn't my thought is that Asian also looks like it's from Shem. Asian.
Could be. It could be. I never thought of it. Maybe. Maybe we'd have to look at how the name was derived and see where it came from. Possibly some Latin root. I'm gonna guess. It's a total guess on my part. Who knows? We'd have to look it up. I'm sure there have been studies regarding the genealogy, where these come from. So, okay. That's it for today.
I have another question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I didn't want to take all the time, but nobody's asking. So
Right.
as
Floor
far as
is
the
yours.
Hebrew language, okay, so for the Hebrew language, you said that like everyone was speaking different languages, and then they came and unified to speak Hebrew, and then they were dispersed again.
No, I think if I understood it correctly, he said they all spoke Hebrew, but they also had their own unique languages, but they all understood.
Okay,
Okay. So that's what it was. And when
okay.
they decided to build the Tower of Babel, they decided they would communicate in Hebrew solely. And then that
Oh, okay.
ability was taken away. Yeah,
Okay,
that's
so it
how
was
I
like
understand this.
so Hebrew was like an international language, and then it
That's
became
right.
a
Hebrew was Esperanto. Yes, yes,
right.
it was.
And then,
Correct.
but then they agreed to speak Hebrew only, and then it broke up again.
I don't think so. Only in the context of building the tower did they say they were going to do that. Just like, for example, there was a time when the
Oh,
language
okay.
of diplomacy was French, and you had, in order to be a diplomat, you had to be able to communicate in France. The language of for example, where it comes to airlines and traffic controlling, it's done in English.
Yeah.
Right. All done in English. Not because the people in Timbuktu speak English, but the air controllers there know that they have to communicate in English. It's just the
Okay.
conventions that have taken place. Yeah. So, all right. I think this is a good place to stop.